All right, guys, so I just finished up my morning trail run and I'm about to do some connective tissue training for my Achilles, calves, and soleus. And I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to continue to teach you how to go about training your connective tissue. Now, I know I've sent you lectures, I know I program your workouts, but one of the best ways for me is to not tell you what to do all the time. It's to show you what it looks like in my own training because I have to do it too. So I just went for a run, and it's important to remember that running is a dynamic exercise. And the reason why that's important to understand is because when we're running, we're doing stuff very quickly. And one of the things we've learned for connective tissue training, if we're going to change the structure of connective tissue, it seems like the research says that we need at least 3 seconds when it comes to time under tension for the connective tissue to receive enough stress and strain for it actually to change structure. If it is less than 3 seconds when it comes to the exercise activity or repetition, what happens is it is too quick for the connective tissue to actually get the load into the weak, the damaged tissue, the disorganized tissue, the tissue that has been stress shielded by the nervous system. And a great example of this is plyometrics. So when we do plyometrics, we are spending less than a second on the ground, which is less than 3. And so that is why when it comes to the research, they show that plyometrics really don't change the structure of tendons. That's why if you have a damaged tendon, if you have a tendinopathy, if you have chronic tendon issues, plyometrics are going to be part of the solution because we have to teach the nervous system how to build that top-down component of reactive strength, but it's not going to actually be enough time under tension to fix the damaged tissue. Because when we move quickly, we bypass the strong stuff, we bypass the weak stuff, and we only use the strong fibers because the nervous system is going to pick the best solution, and the best solution is to not use the damaged parts of the tendon and the fibers and all of that. So what am I saying? Running is a dynamic activity. When we run, even slow, we're only spending about 350 milliseconds on the ground. That is significantly less time than even a 3-second isometric. So if we think about it, one of the best times to actually do your connective tissue training when it comes to the calf, Achilles, and soleus is actually right after the run. And that kind of seems a little backwards because people would be like, whoa, Taylor, I thought you've been teaching me that connective tissue should or can be loaded about every 6-ish hours. And that is true, but you have to remember that when we run, it is a dynamic exercise, so we are not getting forced into the damaged and weak parts of the tendon. It's not enough time under tension. So it's almost like you just ran, so you dynamically loaded, and you challenged the nervous system, and you did challenge the tendons, but you did not get load into the weakest parts. So you can absolutely do this. In fact, most pro sports teams, like basketball, will get done playing their game, they'll do their interviews, and then they will go and do their isometrics immediately after. And one of the reasons for this and why it's a good strategy, you don't have to do it, is you just got done with your run, so theoretically in your training schedule, that is going to be the longest you have in terms of recovery before your next running session. So if you do it immediately after, you're going to send that signal for the collagen to align to get load into the damaged tissues. Remember, load is healing, and we want to load the tissues with the issues. So let's say I have a run on Tuesday and Thursday. Well, if I do my loading immediately after, well, that is going to give me plenty of time where I could do another 2 loading sessions before I get to my next run. And remember, the nervous system might need a day or 2 of rest if you do a high intensity run, but our biology doesn't need that long of a break. It needs about 4 to 6 hours or 8 hours before we can load it again. So that confuses a lot of people because they say, wait a second, shouldn't you wait like 6 to 8 hours after your run to do a loading session? It's not the same thing. Dynamic and static is completely different. You are not loading these same structures even though you are loading the Achilles, calves, and soleus. So I'm going to do some connective tissue loading, and since I did a run, which is dynamic and fast and more intense, I do not have to go near maximal here, so I'm not going to do an overcoming isometric. An overcoming isometric, we want to remember, is called a PEMA, which stands for a pushing isometric muscle action. So if you ever see the word PEMA, P-I-M-A, that stands for a pushing iso, which is an overcoming iso, which is where we're going to kick, push, and flex into an object or piece of machine that is not going to budge and move. And that is going to be a higher intensity iso that is going to be more for the nervous system. It will build tendon stiffness as long as we get 3 seconds under tension. But I don't need to do that right now because I just did what would be considered a dynamic, more high intensity exercise, which is running fast. So what I need to do is I need to be somewhere submaximal. And for me, submaximal is a weight that I can hold from 10 seconds or longer. And so what I've got is I've got my slant board. I've got set up at about 20 degrees, 25, doesn't matter. Remember, the goal of connective tissue training is we focus on 3 things. We want to put the tissues at length. Longer length equals more strain equals more gains in the connective tissue. Now, how much length I put in the tissue is dependent on how much load I'm going to use or how I feel. Obviously, if I'm very tight, sore, and tense from my run or my training, I won't be able to put as much length and load into the tissue. But obviously, more length is going to put more strain, and more strain equals more gain. Remember, strain in the literature and the science just means stretch, length. So when you hear tendon strain, that sounds like a bad thing. But if we don't strain a tendon, if we don't stretch a tendon, if we don't put length into the tendon, it will never be loaded, it will never get stronger, it never get faster, and never get better. So I am going to do my work off a slant board. I think it's one of the best tools. And then I've already done 1 set right now. And you're going to see I'm not doing anything crazy. This is not magical. It's not sexy. Most people, when they start doing connective tissue training, they'll do it. And since their heart rate's not going up, they're not breathing hard. And when they get done with a set, unless it's a high intensity set, they don't feel like destroyed. Yeah, if you hold an isometric long enough, you're going to get a deep burn, you're going to get shakes, you're going to get quakes, you're going to get where you're like, wow, this is really hard. So if I have you hold like a 3-minute iso, your calf's going to be on fire, your quad's going to be on fire. But if we're holding a submaximal iso for like 15 seconds, you're not going to feel destroyed, devastated, and that's the point because we're not trying to stimulate the nervous system. Remember, the nervous system thrives off of heavy weight, high intensity, quick, and fast. So if I was trying to stimulate my nervous system, I would need to do something maximal, fast, near maximal. If I was trying to work on my aerobic system, I would need my heart rate to get up. I would need to have my breathing increase. I would need to do something cyclic where I'm getting a lot of reps like running, swimming, cycling, rowing. That's not this. So when you do connective tissue training, a lot of people are like, I don't feel anything magical. Now, when you load the tissue with the issue, you should feel like you're loading stuff. You should feel like you're getting load into an area that feels weak, vulnerable, shitty, tight, not all right. So there should be a sensation. If not, you need to add more weight. But it's not like a set of barbell squats. When you do them, if you do a set of barbell squats, you're breathing hard, your heart rate's up, you're like, wow, I'm feeling fatigued. You feel the burn, you feel the pump, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you feel this like badass wave of I'm getting stronger, faster, better. When people do connective tissue training, they're like, meh. And this is the reason why no one does it. Because you don't get instant results. You don't feel like a badass. It doesn't feel like you just conquered the world and or something that you should share on Instagram. It just looks like you're holding an ISO, you get load, and then you take a break. You get load and ISO, take a break. And honestly, after a set of isometrics, which might take 5 to 10 minutes, you're not that tired. You're not that devastated. Now, you should feel like you loaded the tissue with the issue. So if you don't feel some challenge, you're way undershooting this unless you're doing something like in rehab. But I think that's one of the reasons why people like abandon this or don't believe in this and don't see the magic in this is because, remember, when it comes to connective tissue timelines are different for different tissues. So the nervous system can adapt after a single rep, after a single set, after a single workout. your cardiovascular system, especially your anaerobic system, can adapt workout to workout. That's why if you start doing intervals, after a couple weeks, you already feel fitter. Connective tissue takes months and months to build. They show tendons just starts to get gains at 6 months of continuous, consistent loading. So if you do like a tendon loading session for like 3 weeks and then you stop, no wonder why it didn't work. And also, one of the things that's happening is when people do their connective tissue loading is they tend to be doing other stuff alongside of it. So we want to think as connective tissue loading as a building stimulus. In my world, that's called an anabolic stimulus, which is making something better, stronger, faster. So you think of anabolic steroids are building. Catabolic means breaking down. So we got to remember that in a lot of training programs, we're not stopping training, and a lot of times we're still doing the stuff that has been causing the issue. So maybe you've been running and that's been causing your knee pain. Well, we don't need to stop that. We might need to play around with the demands a little bit, but we have to understand that we're also battling probably years of training errors or years of neglect, and that is something that we have to also battle our way through. So when I say that sometimes you might do the same isometric for 4 months before you really start to see the gains aggregate, it's true. Just think of like when you have your 401k, or you invest in the stock market, or you have your bank account. Day by day, it's literally the same. After a year or two, you might actually accrue a significant amount of money. So connective tissue training is anti-sexy. It's boring. Now, it can get intense, it can get crazy, and it can get hard, and it should get hard. Just like when it comes to cardio. When it comes to cardio, we would be foolish to only do zone 1 and zone 2 work. Yes, that would build you a wonderful base and foundation, and you'd be metabolically fit, and you'd have a potential to be a fast, strong runner, cyclist, high rocks athlete, whatever. But it would be illogical and insane to think all you need is low intensity. So when it comes to connective tissue training, I like to think of it like cardio. Most of our work is going to be zone 1, zone 2. It's not sexy. It's anti-sexy. It's boring. It doesn't make you feel like a badass, but it's the foundation. It's the magic. It's the base. It's because we can do high amounts of volume of this stuff throughout the week with minimal recovery cost, which is the key. Because if you're running a lot, if you're rucking a lot, if you're playing sports like basketball, soccer, if you're whatever you're doing, you're demanding a lot of your body, and those are a lot of catabolic stimuluses. So if we do a lot of submaximal, and submaximal, remember, is anything from like a 10-second hold to like a 3-minute hold. So 10 seconds can still be, right? If you have enough weight, can still be challenging, but it's not going to feel like doing a set of walking lunges. And that's important to understand. And remember, that's why most people abandon this stuff and stop doing it, because they don't get the, oh, I did a set of heavy bench press on Tuesday and then next week I already feel stronger, faster, better. Remember, if you do like a near maximal bench press, the next week you have stimulated nervous system gains and you're going to feel stronger, faster, better. You might do this and for weeks you don't really feel like anything's happening. And that's the thing, right? Is you're searching for a feeling rather than focused on tissue specific adaptations. And remember, connective tissue is not muscular, right? It's not muscle tissue. It's the stuff that wraps and surrounds muscle. So it needs different loading stimuluses, which are going to be our isometrics. And we have our holding isometrics, which are called HIMAs, holding isometric action. We have our PIMAs, which are pushing. Apparently I can't say the word push today. I'm trying to say it like Sean Connery, pushing. And then we have our eccentrics. We have our quasi-eccentric. We've got so many different, but our main bread and butter are going to be isometrics and eccentrics, but specifically more isometrics because that's static work, and that's going to be the most time under tension. Now, I know what you're thinking. Taylor, can you just get to the exercise? The exercise isn't as important as what are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? How do we do it, right? What is our intent, and how do we know we've achieved that intent? So when it comes to connective tissue training, we have to understand what are our intentions. Our intentions are not to get sweaty, not to get tired, not to get sore. Now, if you get sore, if you get sweaty, if you get tired, that's okay. But our intention is not simply feel tired or feel like that. Our intention is to stimulate connective tissue adaptations. One of that is going to be the organization of connective tissue, which requires holding isometric positions in various positions. Because remember, connective tissue can be trained in millions of different angles. That's why we don't want to be strong somewhere. We want to be strong everywhere. So our intention with isometric training is the long game. And the long game is making sure that we understand that most injuries are because our neurology, which is our nervous system, has outpaced our biology, which is our joints, connective tissue, and muscle. That's why when people are running, when people say, oh man, if I ask most people, why can't you run 100 miles a week? They don't say, it's not because I have enough time. If I ask people, why can't you run 100 miles a week? It's not because their heart can't beat that much. If I ask them, why can't they run 100 miles a week? It's not because their lungs can't do that. It's because they would say, my shins, my calves, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my hamstrings would hurt too much, or I would get injured. And notice how they're naming biological stuff. So is this kind of a sales pitch right now for you that I need you to just think from now until you die that you're doing connective tissue specific training? Absolutely. Is it magical? No. Is it sexy? No. Does it feel like most of the time you're not doing too much unless you're doing a high intensity hold, holding to failure, and struggling? Absolutely. So a lot of people are going to feel like they're not doing anything. It's because they're so used to doing something for their aerobic system. Or they're used to doing like a set of heavy squats and they feel this instant receipt of, oh, I challenged myself. Now, when you do isometrics, you should feel challenged. You should feel like you're loading the tissue with the issue. You should feel the stuff getting challenged. Like you should feel like you're putting force into areas that if we do something quickly like running, jumping, or sport, there's just not enough time under tension. So one more time, 3 seconds is about the minimum amount of time we need for an isometric. So I'm going to now put my calf, Achilles, and soleus at length using this. You're going to see how I'm going to get into position. I'm going to search and destroy, and it's not magical, but I want to show you guys the same stuff. So I dynamically loaded my run. Now it's time to statically load the connective tissue. So my thought is running is more catabolic stimulus. Now I'm going to get an anabolic stimulus, which is a building stimulus. And that way, by the time, so I'm not running tomorrow. So the reason I'm doing this right now is because I just ran. So if I do this right now, I could get another loading session tonight, and I could get 1 or 2 more tomorrow. And by the time I run Saturday morning, then I've had 1, 2, 3 anabolic stimuluses for my calves, soleus, and Achilles by the time I get to my next run, which is freaking awesome. So that doesn't seem like a big deal between my Thursday and Saturday run, but imagine after 3 years of doing that. That's going to make a big difference. So remember, the tissue takes time. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 10 months, a year, 16 months. Right now, if I told you, hey, this might take 16 months of work to undo the 7 years of unwork that you were doing before, that's really hard to accept that, oh man, maybe for the past 7 years, I was beating up, neglecting, or damaging tissue without understanding how to train it and repair it and build it. That's okay, but I just need you to have patience, because what happens is most people will do it because I program it, but I'm trying to persuade you that beyond when you're done training with me, whether that's next month or a year from now or whenever, when you're on your own one day, don't abandon connective tissue training because it's not sexy, it's boring, it burns. You don't feel like you're challenging yourself like a set of walking lunges or kettlebell swings or burpees, you have to understand the parking brake on most of what you want to do when it comes to running, jumping, is going to be the connective tissue, the joints, and the muscle. If I had 1,000 of my last direct messages asking for help when it comes to pain problems and plateaus, people are not saying, oh, I don't think my heart rate can get high enough, or they're complaining about joint issues, tendon issues, and connective tissue issues. And it's because your nervous system adapts quickly. So if all we do is high intensity intervals and we don't do any zone 1, 2 work, we're going to absolutely be destroyed, burnt out, and overtrained. Same thing. When it comes to your strength training, a lot of people only do zone 4 and 5 strength training. They never do zone 1 and 2 connective tissue work. So if I say go for a 60-minute zone 2 bike, feels almost like you're not doing anything. That's the whole point, is easy is easy. So when we're doing zone 1, zone 2 connective tissue work, it shouldn't feel devastating. Now, if you do zone 3, zone 4, zone 5 connective tissue work, it should feel. So if I have you do a max effort isometric that lasts 5 seconds, okay, that's a zone 4 iso. You should feel just like when you do intervals. Intervals should be hard and challenging. Okay, that was a lecture and a lesson before I just show you how I practice what I preach, and I have to do what I teach myself. And I promise that the magic is in stuff like this when it comes to being able to do awesome stuff. But it doesn't show up right away, and most people abandon this. And like I said, we need to consistently do this until we die, right? And that's how we're going to build up. So I was just at, right, I normally warm up at body weight, so you can see here, right, putting the tissue at length, and then what I do is I find a nice angle, and then obviously I'm just going to rock forward and lift up. I just did that with two 35-pound kettlebells, and I was able to hold that for easily over a minute. So remember, when it comes to our isometric timelines, 3 seconds, since that's the minimal amount of time to get to connective tissue loading gains, we're putting that at 100% of max. A 10-second hold is like 90% of max. I know the math doesn't math perfectly, but it's an isometric. It's not linear based. And a 30-second isometric, so say you could hold an iso 30 seconds and then you failed right at 30 seconds, that's about 80% of your max. So that helps you get a ballpark of where you're at. So if I have you hold an isometric and you pick a weight and you hold it for a minute, you are well below max. You are at probably 50% of max. So submaximal is like 90% or less in most people's books. So if you're able to hold an isometric for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, so if you pick a weight and you can hold something for 10 to 15 seconds before you need a break or lose position, that's like 85% of max. You're submaximal. And remember, when it comes to connective tissue, most of our work we need to do is submaximal. So, all right, I'm going to jump up. I was at 2x35s. We're going to jump up to 2x44s. And then remember, so I'm here, not sexy, not crazy. Want to find my position, feel like I've got a nice position. I want to solidify, feel the tissue with the issue, feel the stuff I want to load, and then I like to balance here. Now, a big misconception is that every set has to be to failure. A lot of times we do isometric sets, and I say, pick a weight that you fail at about 30 seconds. And that's because we need to make sure that we are using enough weight. Because if I tell you to be at a 30-second iso, and you can hold a weight for 2.5 minutes, you're way under what an 80% isometric should be. But the truth is, you don't have to fail every isometric, so I can hold this for much, much longer. Finding the tissue, loading, not losing position. Now, a lot of people are like, hey, how come you're resting your head? Shouldn't this be about balance? This is not about balance. We're not training balance. We're loading connective tissue. So it doesn't matter if you're holding on to anything. In fact, for a lot of isometric works, for a lot of isometrics, we should hold on to something so we can direct the isometric work into the tissue. Because a lot of times, if you lose balance or lose position, you're going to put load into the strong tissue. Because remember, your body runs away from loading the weakest tissue. So I'm here. Boom. Okay. Notice how boring this is. You're probably already clicking off, and that's okay. It's boring. I can explore different foot positions, so I can go foot out, see if I find a new line of connective tissue that feels weak, vulnerable. The biggest mistake is people do isometrics only in one line, in one position, in one direction. You have thousands of different lines of connective tissue, so change the angle slightly each time or every set. And your goal is to search and destroy for stuff that feels vulnerable. One of the best words that I describe is it feels shitty, it feels tight, it's not all right, feels wonky, vulnerable, weird, wonky. All those terms are connective tissue that is disorganized, lacks stiffness, is not healthy. So when I go into that, if I turn my foot or bend my knee a little bit more or strain my hip, I'm searching and destroying for where I find a position that feels vulnerable, tight, weak, wonky, weird, and then I'm trying to put load into that area because that's an area that when I'm running or doing a dynamic exercise like a jump, a run, a sprint, I'm not getting load into, which is called stress shielding, which we've had lectures on. And that's one of the reasons why we can keep running and jumping and playing sport for months, if not years, and then all of a sudden, someone will be playing football and boom, their Achilles goes, and they're like, oh my gosh, I must not have warmed up. No, your tendon's been degenerating for 7 years. You just haven't ever looked and searched for areas of the tendon that were becoming weaker. Remember, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Well, the strong stuff gets stronger and the weak stuff gets weaker when we do not dynamic exercises. So that's the importance of coming and doing your static isometrics and making sure that you search and destroy for every nook and cranny of that tendon, of that muscle, of that joint that does not have strength, does not have organized connective tissue. And remember, organized connective tissue just as healthy connective tissue. Shitty connective tissue, damaged tendons feel disorganized, and disorganized feels wonky, weird, vulnerable, tight, not all right. You'll know what I'm talking about. You'll feel like if let's say your pec is not healthy and you've got poor quality connective tissue here, if you did like an iso here, you would feel like, ooh, you're almost feeling like, ooh, something, I'm worried something's gonna snap, or it feels like, it doesn't feel good. Okay. Now, I'm not feeling enough of a challenge. So I could probably held that weight for 2 minutes. That's not stimulating enough. So I'm going up in weight. So even though we're submaximal, if I tell you to be at an 80-second isometric, and that's 30 seconds of work, and you can hold for 60 seconds, that would be the equivalent of saying, hey, today I want you to squat at 200 pounds and you only put 100 pounds on the bar. It's not wrong, but it's missing the intent, okay? This isn't sexy. All right, see if I get enough stim here. Find the tissue, load the tissue. I like doing these little 3, 5, 10-second holds with a short break. They feel really nice, especially post-run. And you just missed it there, but I actually just twisted my knee out to see if I could find a different angle that felt weaker. So on that set, I turned my knee out. On this set, I'm going to turn my knee in. It's amazing how, so there, if you look at the camera, I turned my knee out, and then that next set I turned my knee in. It's not even the same exercise. When you manipulate a joint by a degree, you hit thousands of different lines of connective tissue. That's why you don't want to be strong somewhere, you want to be strong everywhere. Other side. Now, how many sets, how many reps? This is where people have a hard time because they're so used to just sets and reps being the number one thing that you think about in a workout, which as you learn how to actually go about training, you realize that sets and reps are not the number one thing we focus on. The number one thing we focus on is what adaptation are we trying to achieve. Most people in the gym say, okay, I'm doing a squat, how many sets and reps should I do? They're not even thinking what adaptation they're trying to get. How do they know they achieve that adaptation? And then they can pick their exercise and their sets of reps. So for us, most people will be like, well, how many sets and reps? See, when it's not wrong because you need to know what to do and how many things to do, but that is like a tertiary question that you need to answer, but the answer will sort itself out. Because we know connective tissue has a sweet spot of around 2 to 10 minutes. Some people think 15 to 20 minutes. Basically where you're going to get the stimulation, you're going to get the adaptation, and then you're going to have diminished returns beyond that point. So I always talk about there's a sweet spot of about 2 to 10 minutes where right now I'm not keeping track. I don't even know how many sets and reps I've done. I just know that I've got my clock on. I have my clock on. I'm doing a 20-minute block and I'm accumulating time under tension. And the heavier I go, so if I doubled the weight, I wouldn't hold as long. See, here's how I think about this. Number one, what adaptation am I trying to achieve? The number one goal, because the goal of strength training is adaptation, not demonstration. Demonstration would be like, I'm going to do a squat for 5 sets of 5. Now, most people are going to say, well, I want to get stronger. Strength is not one thing, it's many things, and strength isn't specifically an adaptation. It's a byproduct of adaptations. So for instance, if someone says, well, I'm just trying to get stronger. Well, what are you trying to improve? Are you trying to improve absolute strength? Are you trying to improve relative strength? Are you trying to improve muscular strength? Are you trying to improve muscular endurance? Are you trying to change the joint space? Are you trying to use the joint space? Are you trying to challenge the stress stiffening of connective tissue? Are you trying to challenge the architecture of connective tissue? So most people go into the gym and they think, okay, today's leg day, I'm going to squat and I'm going to do 5 sets of 5. And they think that the sets and reps gives them the adaptation no matter what. That's not true. So if I took this is like a foot roller. Ready? So if I take this and I do 5 sets of 5, do I get stronger? No. So sets and reps are meaningless outside the context of what adaptation are you trying to achieve. And then the second question is, once I say what my adaptation is, then second is I say, okay, what exercise or position or setup am I going to use to achieve that adaptation? So one more time, I am trying to stimulate the connective tissue because I did dynamic loading running. So since I'm trying to stimulate connective tissue, I know I'm going to use a position of length. For load, I'm going to go submaximal because I just ran, so I don't need to go do a maximal stimulus. So length, load, and time are the big three when it comes to connective tissue. Time, we know that I only need to spend about 2 to 10 minutes to get an anabolic or a gaining stimulus. Now, 2 to 10 minutes, how could I do that? I could do 3 sets of 3 minutes, which would be super light but long duration. So I might pick weights, hold for 3 minutes and do that 3 times. I could do, like right now I'm doing kind of 10 to 15 second holds, and then I'm doing about 3 to 4 reps, which is about a minute, and now I'm doing that over 4 to 5 sets. It doesn't matter. What matters is, did you stimulate connective tissue at length, and did you have enough load that you put load into the tissue that had the issue, right? So I don't want people to get think I'm coming at them or I'm preaching at them or I'm throwing shade at you if you're like, hey, sets and reps. Sets and reps is like, it will sort itself out. So here's an example. if my goal is to stimulate the nervous system, I already know my sets and reps are going to be extremely low. But most people will just say, oh, for instance, like if I was going to focus on absolute strength, sets and reps, I could do 3 reps, I could do 5, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to do what I need to do to get the stimulation and then I'm done. So same here. I'm just trying to get, and people are going to say, well, how do I know that I'm getting the correct adaptation? So what adaptation do I want? What setup or exercise or position or machine am I going to use to create it? So I'm using a slant board and kettlebells. And then how do I know that I've achieved the goal? Well, how do I know? Number 1, I'm in a lengthened position. Number 2, I know what I know I'm trying to get a weight where I feel like I'm loading the, so if I just do this at body weight, I don't really feel much going on. I don't feel like I'm forcing load into a weak area. Because if you don't use enough load, you're not going to fatigue the strong stuff. And if you don't fatigue the strong stuff, force is not going to link into the weak stuff. So for this, I finally started to feel some of the weaker, gunkier stuff once I got to 106 pounds. So now I'm going to go up again. Now I'm going to get to a point where I feel like I've got a weight that is putting enough load to fatigue the strong stuff, and then the force will finally go into the weak stuff. That's where we get that stress shielding to go down. And then I'm going to hold. And right now, I know if I'm between 2 and 10 minutes, I'm going to be fine. Let's say I undershot and I went really low. Well, I could do another session later today. So if I'm worried that I didn't use enough weight to stimulate, just wait 6 to 8 hours and do another session. But if you use enough load and you get like where you feel like that area, that tissue was loaded and kind of gets that nice, it's kind of soreness, but it's kind of like it got worked. So when you train connective tissue that's disorganized, shitty, weak, not all right, you get sore, but it's this different kind of, it's like this fatigued, challenged, it's like you're getting loaded into an area that hasn't, so it's this very unorthodox, it's not the same soreness and discomfort that you experience doing like a set of chest flies. It's a different type. It's similar but different, okay? So, I know this video is just rehashing like the same concept over and over, but I'm teaching you and then I'm showing you. Obviously, if I wasn't talking, this would have taken 5 minutes and I'd already be done, but I'm trying to really emphasize some key points. Is what is our intent? We need to, our intention is king. Intention is king, and then context is queen. So I need to know, when it comes to every exercise, whether I'm programming it for you or in the future you're programming it for yourself, your number one thing is not say, what exercise am I doing today? Should I squat or deadlift? Now, if you want to squat or deadlift, okay, now your intent is to lift a lift. But if you're not trying to progress a lift because you have it for a test or it's because you want to PR in it, now your question is, what adaptations do I need? So what adaptations do I need? And then the context of that is, well, what setup am I going to use to achieve it? I'm going to use a slant board. Am I going to use a seated calf raise machine? Am I going to use kettlebells? Am I going to use a barbell? Am I going to use a machine? Am I going to use a holding an isometric, a pushing isometric? And then sets and reps, then once you've answered those questions, then you can start saying, okay, well, how many sets and reps am I going to do to make sure that I achieve my intent? Okay? Now I've got the 70 on this side. See, that feels like it's getting loaded into the good stuff. That's it. See, that's a good hit right there. Feel like that's getting loaded into the gunky, the gunk, the funk. Much better. Changing the angle slightly, getting a little bit more knee bend. Get a little bit more soleus on this one. Ooh, that's harder. Add a little bit more knee bend, much harder. If I had a straighter leg here, a little bit more calf. So a little bit more calf on this one. And notice, like I said, do I need to go to failure for these sets? No, I don't. If I was trying to get more of an analgesic effect, which is a decrease in pain, getting close to failure is going to be fine. So if you do isometrics before you run, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because one more time, it's a static versus dynamic. So you can do isometrics before an activity to get a decrease in pain. And if you do that, it's generally better to hold until failure. But right now, I'm just doing a couple reps. So honestly, my grip is just going. So, all right, other side. Hopefully this is helpful, just seeing the same things that I'm having you do in your training, I do. Heart rate's not going up. When I get done with the set, I'm not screaming and dying. And versus a catabolic exercise, I did grip yesterday, so my grip is smoked. We're so used to like a catabolic stimulus, which is, oh, I go for a long run, and then my calves, my hamstrings, my quads are tight, tired, and fatigued. We're so used to catabolic stimuluses, and so many people do way too much volume of weight, like when it comes to the gym. People do way too much volume at too high of intensity, and a lot of people are so used to damaging themselves when it comes to training by doing way too much volume at the wrong intensities that they're so used to their body just feeling shittier after workouts that when they do an anabolic stimulus like this, where you're building but not breaking down and you're not damaging, it's so weird because later that day, you might feel better, and the next day you don't feel shitty and horrible. Now, if there's a caveat, let's say your tendon has been stress shielding shitty, damaged tissue. Well, if you have shitty and damaged connective tissue or a part of the tendon that hasn't been getting loaded, and then all of a sudden you start isometrically loading it, and then you start getting like shaking, quaking, burning, or load into an area that hasn't, you're gonna get crazy sore, which is actually a good thing as long as it's not like the tendon, as long as the tendon doesn't become painful the next day or next few days. But if you get soreness into the muscle, into the areas, what that's actually a sign of is you finally loaded an area that has been desperate for load. So of course, if something hasn't been loaded, you're gonna get some pretty freaking good DOMs. So a lot of people, when they start connective tissue loading for the first few months, they can get really crazy sore off of it because they're finally loading the weak and damaged areas that are getting stress shielded during dynamic exercises like squatting, running, jumping, and lifting. So that's why. But as you do this eventually, so I do this all the time. I don't do it after every run, but I do it after most runs. When I do this, I can do this twice a day, and it doesn't like make me, like a lot of people will be like, doesn't this make your calves really sore and tight? It's the opposite. If I do this right now, so at 8 a.m., and then I do it tonight, and then tomorrow I do it twice, by the time I get to my run Thursday, my calves, Achilles, and soleus feel freaking good because I've sent 3 building stimuluses to the tendon. And remember, the tendon actually repairs quickly when it comes to a stimulus, but it takes months and months and months to rebuild because tendons don't break down over 10 days. They break down over 10 years. So most of the time by the time someone comes to me and says, man, Taylor, I'm having knee pain, I'm having like tendon pain when I run or ruck or jump, or my Achilles, I hate to say it, by the time you have long-term chronic pain, the tendon has probably been breaking down or degenerating for probably anywhere between 3 to 7 years. Now, you're a human. It's gonna happen. It's life. We live life. We're humans. We live in a fallen world with broken bodies that constantly need repair and regeneration, and we make training errors and mistakes. So I don't want you to become fearful. Don't become fearful of doing too much or not training hard, but this is the stuff that allows you to train hard and keep training hard for the rest of your life, right? No one ever says zone 1, zone 2 cardio makes me feel like a badass. Now, if you do enough of it, you will feel tired, but most of the time, if you do like a 45-minute zone 2, zone 1 bike or run or swim, you sometimes can feel better after it. Now, if you're doing high amounts of volume, so, if you're doing like 20 hours of cardio and you do a zone 1 cardio, it can feel tiring. Same thing if you're doing a lot of running and rucking and stuff. If you do this, you're going to feel tension and tightness. But the whole point is this is an anabolic stimulus, and you're not getting the breakdown that you experience when you do like 2 hours of pickleball or an hour of running. So this is why it's hard for people, because people are so used to operating in in movement patterns, meaning like, oh, today's workout is RDL for 4 sets of 3. They're focused on movement patterns and sets and reps, which is not wrong. It's okay to think of what movement pattern what movement pattern does this exercise fall in terms of category. You need to know what sets and reps you do, but those are questions that come after. What adaptation are you trying to achieve so you get stronger, faster, better, or you eliminate pain problems or plateaus? What setup or exercise or position or machine or are you going to use to achieve it? And then 3, what are you going to use in terms of load and time, which is obviously sets and reps, right? The heavier the load, the less sets and reps I do. The lighter the load, the more sets and reps I do. If I do 4 sets to failure, I'm going to use lighter loads than if I do 1 set to failure. The sets and reps will sort themselves out. The time we really prioritize sets and reps is if we're going to cycle an exercise, which means we're going to train it weekly. Like, oh, we're going to deadlift or squat every single week, and we want our deadlift to go from 200 to 400 pounds. Well, then we're focused on weightlifting and practicing lifting a weight. We're not focused on a specific adaptation, even though in the long run, we will get some fall off from that. So I have done enough work to stimulate connective tissue. I don't feel beat up. I don't feel destroyed. I feel like I put load. I loaded the tissue at length. I did it statically versus my dynamic run. I didn't go to failure, but I put enough load where I feel like I got force. Now what I could do, so I went into a lengthened position. Now I can flip around and do a shortened position. So if we ever do short position training, we have to do it after length. So because what we're going to do when we get into short positions, we're going to get really crampy. So whenever we do hold its, where we go into short range motion, try to actively hold, you get you get tight, you get cramp. So we want to do long lengths before we do short lengths. So if I do long hamstrings and then short hamstrings, that's good. But if I shorten my hamstring and then I try to get it in a front split, you're just going to be so tight that you're not going to get further. So we always do long before short. So what I'm going to do now is I just put my calf and Achilles and soleus into a lengthened position, which is dorsiflexion. I'm going to now flip around and just do a couple quick sets, which I call this the leaning soleus. So this is the leaning soleus bridge. So I'm going to do this now because it's a great opportunity to get into a short range of motion. Because remember, we want to train stuff in its long ranges. So here's my bicep. So I want to train my bicep here, 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 here. That's long. If I train my bicep here, that's neutral. And then I want to train short, 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 short. Now, sometimes we just do a bicep curl and we go from long to short. Other times we do an eccentric and we start short to long. Other times we do an iso here. Other times we do an iso here. Other times we do an iso here. So the answer is we want to train the entire range of motion. Some days we do full range. Sometimes we do partial range. Other days we do isometric range in certain positions. Other days we do short to long. The answer is we're training the entire spectrum so we don't just become some athletes, we become everything athletes. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around. So this is one of my new exercises that I've been experimenting with. It's devastating. This cramps the bejesus out of your toe flexors and your calves and soleus. So we're going to flip this around. I lower this down a bit. And it's going to be like a plank. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go from dorsiflexion, which is toe up, to plantar flexion, where I get my calves and Achilles really short, and I want to try to squeeze. I want to try to squeeze and wrinkle. So I want to try to create wrinkles in my Achilles by squeezing it. So I'm here. I'm going to kind of be almost like a straight leg bridge. The furthest the closer this is. So this is easier. This is harder. And this is going to be devastating. Now I'm holding on. So I'm going to lean back. I'm going to actively gas pedal down. So I'm going to gas pedal down, and then I'm going to try to squeeze my Achilles. Then I want to try to extend my hips, and then I'm going to get destroyed here. I'm going to lift. I'm going to hold the position and then lift. I'm going to bring this in just a little bit. It looks silly, but it's so hard here. And my heel is not touching. Doing these little max effort short isos. It's much harder than it looks. You can see I'm active. That's plantar flexion, toe away. Then I'm holding that position. So I'm getting some nice supination out of that foot, or making that rigid foot. So my posterior tib is working. I could go toe in. So I can, same thing. I could go toe out. I could go toe in. We don't want to get caught training the same angle and the same position forever. We want to train everywhere. Because in the real world, we don't move in straight lines unless you're sprinting, but the truth is, we want to load every angle and position. The biggest mistake is people get caught in these movement patterns where they only move in one direction for months and years and years. And the second, so they squat here and they get strong, but the second their knee goes there, boom, because they've never trained it. It's the same thing. Set 2, I could go toe out, get a little bit more of that post tib. I could go toe in. Mess with different angles of pronation, supination. And I'm pretty cooked after running now. Okay. Now, this video is almost an hour. This would have taken 5 to 10 minutes had I not been talking. And I would have done it, I could have done it once I grabbed so once I got done with my runs, my priority is refueling, so carbohydrate. 50% of what I burned in the session. Then immediately I say, okay, if I can go and immediately statically load, so that way now, let's say that I get really sore off of this. So if I get really sore off of this, I don't have to isometrically load tonight or tomorrow. I might just now get the longest recovery between my next run theoretically as possible. So there's nothing wrong if I did this tomorrow. That's totally fine. So if I did this tomorrow, that's not bad or wrong, because a lot of people say, well, do you do isos before your run, after your run, the next day? The answer is we just got to do them, because most people, like I said, right now, when I'm training you, it's going to be completely different than when you're on your own one day. So the answer is we just need to do them, because most people will do these for a few weeks and then they abandon them for squatting, lunging, jumping, and all that stuff. So notice, squatting, dynamic exercise, lunging, dynamic. Those are not where we're holding static positions to hit different lines of connective tissue. So most people abandon static holds, and then after weeks and months, what happens is the strong stuff gets stronger, the weak stuff gets weaker, and then it's funny because the weak stuff is always your parking brake. I hope this video just continued to reinforce the talking points and the teaching points that have been in other lectures, but just shows you I'm doing the same stuff. And it's not sexy. And you've probably, maybe you clicked off, if you've made it this far in this video, congratulations, because this is a long video to make it through. But the lessons I'm teaching here are important. And I'm trying to instill wisdom that I've learned over my career. And if I had spent more time doing stuff like this, I probably would have had way less pain problems and plateaus and setbacks in my career. So it's not magical because remember, we're doing a lot of catabolic stuff on the side of this. And you've got to get this enough time. So like I said, tendons take time, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, a year. So if you've been loading your tendon, if you've been training with me for 2 months and you still have tendon issues, joint issues, you just got to have patience because sometimes it might take 12 months, right? And it's just, for a lot of people, that's hard because they don't understand that a lot of tendons, a lot of connective tissue issues were 6 years in the making. So they were silent for 6 years. And then they started to whisper, and then they started to talk, and then they started to scream. So that's how it goes in the human body. When it comes to the human body, a lot of issues go unnoticed silently. Then your body starts to whisper to you through tightness, through tension. And then if your body gives you enough tension and tightness over a long period of time, it starts to increase that tension and tightness. Then you start to get discomfort. Then you start to get pain, and then you start to get pain that causes problems, and then you start to get pain that causes plateaus, and then those plateaus cause you to get more pain, and it's the vicious cycle. So this is what connective tissue looks like, loading looks like, and we want to do it all over the body. It doesn't take that long. So think about that. If you did this without all the Taylor talking, that's 5 to 10 minutes, and think about what that's going to do over the course of 10 years. It's going to be the difference between a lot of life and a lot of frustration. So I hope this video was helpful and just shows you what it's like to train your connective tissues consistently, persistently over a long period of time.